welcome to the regular channel. Today, we are going to tackle about the most intriguing and thought-provoking systems of the human body, the reproductive system. While most of the systems in our body, such as the skeletal, nervous, and endocrine system, are investing in keeping us alive, the reproductive system, however, does not really care whether you live or you die. At least, not until it has served its purpose. This system does not kick in until puberty and is more concerned with preparing for the future than keeping you alive. It doesn't care about you as much as it cares about your genes and the future of the human race. This system includes a primary internal sex organ known as gonads, like the testes and the ovaries, the various sex hormones they secrete, and the sperm and egg they produce. It also includes glands and brain parts which aid the gonads in doing what they really need to do, which is basically mate, combine alleles, and produce a baby. It's going to take a lot of time to go through the various parts, hormones, and explain how the production of gametes takes place starting today with the male reproductive system. Now remember, we are talking about the future of humanity.
Human sperm are only about 100,000 the mass of an egg, and they are almost as easy to produce as skin cells. I think of sperm are small and not invested in much beyond the nucleus and a tail and some extra mitochondria to fuel the swimming journey. All they have to do is drop their DNA and fall apart. The risk of failure is still there. In fact, the male gametes have to go through overwhelming odds just to even accomplish a task of a single sperm. However, the males try to beat the odds through the force of sheer numbers. Now, I know you've been wondering why the most vital parts of the male reproductive system are literally left hanging. The testis is tasked with the production of sperm and the male hormones, namely androgen and testosterone. But unlike the ovaries, which are protected inside the body, the testes dangle outside of the body in the scrotum because the rate of which sperm divide or feel the effects of some hormones are diminished at the core body temperature of 37 degrees. The testes have to be outside the body in order to reach the temperature necessary for proper spermatogenesis or sperm production. Even though it produces rather dispensable cells, that doesn't mean the testes aren't complex. Each one is divided into many different sections called lobules, which are loaded with seminiferous tubules. These tubules are the sperm factories, and the sperm-making process is supported by cells in and around the tubules. The Sertoli cells inside the tubes nourish the developing sperm cells, and there are also cells that secrete testosterone, which are called Leydig cells, and they are found around the tubes. In this case, the sperm develop in the outer edge of the tubules and progress inward toward the fluid-filled lumen. Now, it all begins with a trigger. When puberty comes along, your hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH, which tells the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH and LH, which triggers the Leydig cells to release testosterone. Meanwhile, the FSH triggers the Sertoli cells to release androgen-binding protein, or ABP. This binds to the testosterone, creating large concentrations of the stuff, which ultimately triggers sperm production. At the edge of the tubules are the stem cells called spermatogonia that set the sperm-making process in motion by dividing. In fact, they've been doing it all along even before puberty. Throughout childhood, the spermatogonia uses mitosis to continually divide into two identical daughter cells. When puberty starts, the testosterone causes them to divide into two distinct spermatogonia. One side of the daughter cell, called the type A cell, stays near the basal lamina and continues to divide so you never run out of spermatogonia, while the other type, called the type B, push down toward the lumen and turn into primary spermatocytes. These then go into meiosis I and form two smaller haploid cells called secondary spermatocytes, and then rush into meiosis II, which results into 4 spermatids. And each spermatid now have 23 chromosomes needed for fertilization, but they aren't exactly mobile. If they ever find themselves an egg, they need a way to get to and around it. They need a tail. The process by which the spermatid elongates and finally forms a tail or flagellum is called spermiogenesis. And the whole process can take about 5 weeks, but it's not like it holds anything up, because there are many more where the spermatids came from. Now, thinking about the number of spermatogonia and spermatids there in the testes, it is not impossible to think that a mature male can crank out 1,500 sperm per second. Now, if the sperm are going to have to get anything accomplished, they obviously need to leave the seminiferous tubules from which they came from. So even once they have tails, they still need a little help to get moving. Each tubule is surrounded by layers of myoid cells, which, like smooth muscles, rhythmically contract using peristalsis to squeeze the sperm and some fluid secreted by the Sertoli cells through all the twists and turns toward their next destination, the rete testis in the posterior testis. From there, the sperm, although still immobile, leave the testis to the epididymis. The ducts of the epididymis are full of microvilli called stereocilia, which pass nutrients along to feed the idling sperm. It takes nearly 20 days for the sperm to make their way out of this maze, during which they continue to mature. Once through the duct, they enter the inferior epididymis, in which they gain mitochondria in order to have the energy to swim. At this point, they have all the equipment needed to swim, but still lack the ability to move on their own. A skill kept hidden until they leave their epididymis and get activated by a series of glandular secretions.
When that time comes, during ejaculation, the sperm flow from the epididymis through the vas deferens, a tube that travels up behind the bladder and joins the duct from the seminal gland in order to create the ejaculatory duct. The left and right ejaculatory duct pass through the prostate gland and out into the urethra, which runs from the bladder through the penis and into the outside world. This system of tubes feeding into tubes allow all the necessary glands to make their equally necessary contributions to a moving wave of seminal fluid that helps sperm mature and perform their ultimate goal and function, fertilization. The resulting mixture of gland secretions, testicular fluids, and sperm is called semen. Semen provides sperm with nutritional energy, transportation, chemical protection, and finally activates their motility. Now, let's take a look at these glands. The seminal vesicles are a pair of small hollow glands behind the bladder that secrete a yellowish, slightly alkaline fluid, coagulating enzymes, and other things that help nourish and transport sperm. The vesicle also secretes special prostaglandins that aid in increasing sperm success outside the body by decreasing the viscosity of the female cervical mucus and triggering a reverse peristalsis of the uterus that helps draw sperm up the female reproductive tract. Now, the prostate gland encircles the urethra just inferior to the bladder. During ejaculation, it contracts to squeeze its own special secretions into the urethra. This stuff contains an enzyme cocktail that helps keep the semen liquefied, thus making it easier for the sperm to swim through. Finally, we have the pea-sized bulbourethral gland below the prostate that secretes mucus that drains into the urethra to clear up any acidic urine prior to ejaculation. By now, you may be wondering if we're ever going to get to the part that you usually think of when we talk about the male reproductive system. The penis consists of a large shaft that ends in an enlarged tip called the glans penis, which is surrounded by the foreskin. Internally, the penis contains 3 layers of erectile tissues, each wrapped in a layer of dense, fibrous connective tissues. This spongy network is made up of smooth muscles and connective tissue that's full of tiny vascular spaces that fill with blood during sexual arousal and make the penis grow big. I mean, expand and become hard or rigid. The resulting erection is what helps the penis penetrate the vagina. As with the female external genitalia, the penis isn't actually that vital in terms of overall reproductive function. Scientifically speaking, it is just a delivery system to get male gametes as close as possible to the female gametes and reap some payoffs for all the hard work and investment. Now that the male reproductive system has already been discussed, it's time for the female version.
in an anatomical female involves the vulva, external female genital organ, which includes the mons pubis over the pubic bone, labia majora and labia minora. The elongated skin fold surrounds the vestibule, which contains both the urethral and vaginal openings. Beyond that, there lies the vagina, where the menstrual blood and offsprings leave the body, and also where the sperm gets in when the deed is done. But these are just genitalia, the external sexual organs. The head control of the female reproductive system is the ovaries. Each ovary lives inside a fibrous sac that consists of a layer of connective tissue called tunic albuginea and another layer called germinal epithelium. The ovary itself contains the cortex where it houses developing eggs and a medulla that contains the ovary's blood vessels and nerves. Gametes are haploid cells. They only have one set of chromosomes and are formed by meiosis. When the sperm and the egg fuses, they make the diploid cells, which has all the genetic instructions to create an offspring. Ovarian follicles, tiny sac-like structures that each hold a single primary oocyte, a sort of incomplete egg, and along with a bunch of follicle cells around it. Females are born with all the early versions of eggs, about 1 million at the time of birth. These oocytes stop developing after birth. They get stuck in the first stage of meiosis and stay that way for years until puberty comes along and the body is physically ready to reproduce. Human eggs mature one by one, doled out so that every month or so, a mature egg is either fertilized or dies to make way for a new one. The menstrual cycle is about what happens in the uterus in preparation for a fertilized egg and nourish it, while the ovarian cycle is all about the maturation of the follicle and egg and the secretion of sex hormones. It actually drives the menstrual cycle. Every day, even before birth, a bunch of follicles will begin a process of maturation, slowly turning from primary follicles into late tertiary follicles, which are the ones that will support a fully developed egg. This process takes 375 days.
The first day of your menstrual cycle is the first day of your period. The period usually then lasts from 1 to 5 days. If there are any period pains, they'll be at their worst in the first few days of your period. This is because the hormones in your body are causing your womb to actively shed the lining that was built up in the previous menstrual cycle. At the beginning of the cycle, follicle-stimulating hormone is produced by pituitary gland in your brain. This is the main hormone involved in stimulating your ovaries to produce mature eggs.
Follicles are the fluid-filled cavities in your ovaries. Each follicle contains one undeveloped egg. The FSH stimulates a number of follicles to develop and start to produce the hormone estrogen.
Your level of estrogen is at its lowest on the first day of your period. From then on, it increases as the follicles grow. Now, while a number of follicles begins to develop, normally one follicle becomes dominant, and this egg matures within the enlarging follicle. At the same time, the increasing amount of estrogen in your body makes sure that the lining of your womb is thickening with nutrients and blood. This is so that if you do get pregnant, the fertilized egg will have all the nutrients and support it needs to grow.
High estrogen levels are also associated with the appearance of sperm-friendly mucus, or to give its technical name, fertile cervical mucus. You may notice this as a thin, slippery discharge that may be cloudy white. Sperm can swim more easily through this mucus and can survive in it for several days.
The level of estrogen in your body are still increasing, and it causes a rapid rise in luteinizing hormone. This LH surge causes the dominant follicle to rupture and release the mature egg from the ovary, from where it enters the fallopian tube. The tubes are about 10 centimeters long, and interestingly, they aren't actually connected to the ovaries. This means that when the egg pushes through ovary, it has to float a short way through the peritoneal cavity before it gets caught by the fallopian tube. Many women think that they ovulate on day 14, but 14 is an average, and most women will actually ovulate on a different day of the menstrual cycle. Your day of ovulation will vary from cycle to cycle. Some women claim to feel a twinge of a pain when they ovulate, but others feel no sensation at all, and there's no other sign that you are ovulating. Once the egg has been released, it moves along the fallopian tube towards the uterus. A hollow, thick-walled and very stretchable muscular organ that ends with the cervix. The uterus wall is composed of 3 layers: the perimetrium on the outside, the bulky, smooth muscle myometrium that contracts during labor, and the inner mucosal lining, the endometrium, which consists of thin, deep basal layer and an outer functional layer. The egg can live for up to 24 hours. Sperm survival is more variable, but typically 3 to 5 days. So the days leading up to ovulation and the day of ovulation itself are your most fertile. When you are most likely to get pregnant, as soon as you have ovulated, the follicle starts producing another hormone, progesterone. Progesterone causes further build up the lining of your womb in preparation for a fertilized egg. Meanwhile, the empty follicle within the ovary starts to shrink, but carries on producing progesterone and also starts to produce estrogen. You may get symptoms of premenstrual tension or PMS such as breast tenderness, bloating, lethargy, depression, and irritability at this stage. As the empty follicle shrinks, if the egg is not fertilized, levels of estrogen and progesterone decrease. Without the high levels of hormones to help maintain it, the thick womb lining that has been built up starts to break down, and your body sheds the lining. This is the start of your period and the beginning of your menstrual cycle.